as I mentioned in another slide, Abraham Lincoln is already thinking about Reconstruction as early as 1863. So historians generally date Reconstruction, particularly presidential Reconstruction, all the way back to 1863, not 65. Now, what's so special about 1863? Well, the biggest thing is the fact that we have two huge victories for the Union. We have Robert E. Lee being defeated in Gettysburg, and we have the fall of Vicksburg in Mississippi. Now, Lee's defeating Gettysburg, it's not as important back then as we attribute to it today. Mainly because of, with the benefit of hindsight, we know that Lee was never able to be as aggressive as he used to be after Gettysburg, with very, very few exceptions. So we generally think Gettysburg as a turning point of the war. Well, not exactly if you were on the ground at the time. And then, of course, Vicksburg was a major disaster in terms of the fact that the Union controlled the entirety of the Mississippi, splitting the Confederacy into two. So by 1863, it's clear that the United States most likely will win. And so Lincoln's already thinking about the end of the war. And how is that war going to end? How is Reconstruction going to be held up? Well, one thing you have to understand about Lincoln is he's a moderate pretty much with everything, and he's a very lenient commander-in-chief. One of my favorite stories about him is when General George McClellan he comes home from work one day, and in his parlor is Abraham Lincoln and the Secretary of State, William Seward, and there, he's told by his butler that the president is in his parlor to see him. What does McClellan do? Well, in the modern day, we would expect him to go straight to his parlor and talk with him. Well, McClellan, who has no respect for Lincoln, goes upstairs, takes a bath, and tells his butler, "I'm going to bed. Please inform the president." I think any modern-day general would be basically fired from his job immediately, but Lincoln lets it slide. And that's one of the things about Lincoln that we all love. He's very, very lenient. And so it's no surprise, therefore, that Lincoln's plan is lenient. And he comes up with it, and historians call it the 10% plan. So what exactly does the 10% plan mean? Well, basically, it's going to require 10% of the voting population. Now, when I say the voting population, you have to remember I'm meaning adult white males. 10% of the voting population that was around in 1860 needs to swear an oath of loyalty to the Union. So that's step number one. 10% of the population, the voting population, swears loyalty to the Union. Step one. Step two, they are going to have a constitutional convention. And there they're going to write a new constitution, basically reflecting the political reality of the United States, i.e. the dying off of slavery throughout the United States. So that's step two. Step three is going to be that this new constitution, the people are going to be elected according to it. So you're going to have new governors, new senators, new representatives, and new state legislatures. So that's step number three. And then, of course, finally, step number four would be that all of these particularly these new U.S. senators and U.S. representatives will be sent to Congress and be seated. And once you are seated, you are going to have a reconstructed state. That's basically what it's going to be about. It's very lenient from a standpoint of, well, we just had a gigantic bloody civil war. How can this war end with such just a whimper? When you have treason, what do we think of? We think of trials, and we think of hangings, and we think of revenge. Lincoln has none of this on his mind. Yet he's not going to let everyone just go scot-free. He's going to force some people to basically go try to get pardons and whatnot, and he's going to exclude all the top level guys of the Confederacy. But the vast majority of the South is going to go off basically scot-free. And while I'm at it, when people getting away with things or treason trials, for you trivia buffs, the only person to be executed as a result of the Civil War was the commandant of the Andersonville prisoner of war camp for war crimes, particularly when he starved many of his prisoners of war to death. That's really the only guy that gets the most prominent hanging as a result of the Civil War throughout the entirety of Reconstruction. But nonetheless, Lincoln is not only in a hurry here, he's also in trying to give control to people that are inclined to swear an oath of loyalty to the Union. These would be people who are not too keen on secession in the first place. Lincoln is trying to create a Republican Party in the South. We might as well talk about it now. We typically think today that Republicans are in control of the South, and indeed it is so. Look around. There's very few states that have Democratic governors. There's very few states that have Democratic legislators. In fact, I don't think there's any state legislator that's controlled by the Democratic Party in the South. And so, so Lincoln is coming in and he's trying to put a Republican government in the South at the time. Well, remember in our previous video, Republicans are liberals compared to today's Republican Party. So this would be kind of like having Massachusetts Democrats trying to show up into Texas and into neighboring states and trying to install a liberal-style Democratic government in Democratic Party in the South. It's really not going to work too well. So he's trying to build the Republican Party. And how better than by reconstructing the Union. So his plan is put forth, which is in keeping with Lincoln's fundamental purpose. And that fundamental purpose, of course, is the preserving of the Union. Now, if you think it's lenient, well, you're not alone. There were people back then that thought this was way too lenient. Many people in Congress, particularly the radical Republicans, the most extreme of the Republicans, are going to be up in arms about this plan. This is way too lenient. You need at least trials, a couple of hangings, maybe, as a result, for participation in the Confederate government. You need that. And there are some people that absolutely want it. Two guys, Thaddeus Stevens and Charles Sumner. Thaddeus Stevens is a Pennsylvania representative. If you've watched the recent Lincoln movie done by Steven Spielberg, this is Tommy Lee Jones's character. Stevens is a man for the underdog. He hated anybody that would take advantage of other people's that are unable to protect themselves. Well, what better group of people then than slave owners? I mean, after all, here they are taking advantage of people that cannot protect themselves. I mean, I don't think you could think of a better example. Another person is going to have a beef with the South is going to be a man named Charles Sumner. Sumner was the senator from Massachusetts, and if you've taken 1301, you have definitely heard of him. He's definitely has a beef with the South. If you don't remember, this is a guy that literally got the ever-loving you-know-what beat out of him on the Senate floor by a Southern representative. He's caned. The Southern representative by the name of Preston Brooks takes a cane and just beats him almost to death. So you can imagine that these guys have a big problem with Lincoln's plan. They want it to be a lot more stringent when it came to how to deal with the former Confederates and how economically the South was going to be reconstructed. The thing is that Lincoln is an astute enough politician to deal with these types of Republicans, to deal with these politicians in order to keep them happy and to not make them object to his plan too much. What we're going to see, though, is that that after Lincoln is gone, the successor, Andrew Johnson, is not going to be able to be politically skillful enough to deal with these people.